Question 1. Analysis of a scenario where a cloud administrator is tasked with rapidly deploying a new customer-facing application. The application will handle sensitive customer data, and the organization operates under strict data privacy regulations. The administrator is under pressure from the business unit to launch the application within a tight deadline, potentially leading to compromises in security and compliance checks. Which approach best balances the need for rapid deployment with the imperative to maintain regulatory compliance and data security? Option A. Prioritize the business unit's deadline by skipping detailed security reviews and manual compliance checks, planning to address them post-launch. Option B. Proceed with the rapid deployment, relying on the cloud provider's general compliance certifications to cover the application's security and data handling. Option C. Implement automated security controls and continuous compliance monitoring as part of the deployment pipeline, even if it slightly extends the initial launch timeline. Option D. Conduct only manual security reviews and ad hoc compliance checks during the deployment process to ensure a quick launch. The correct answer is C. Implement automated security controls and continuous compliance monitoring as part of the deployment pipeline, even if it slightly extends the initial launch timeline. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and feature iteration with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The pressure to deliver new services quickly can lead to shortcuts that inadvertently expose sensitive data or violate regulatory requirements. The administrator must navigate conflicting priorities and make informed decisions that prioritize security and compliance without completely stifling innovation. The challenge lies in understanding the specific regulatory landscape governing cloud services and data handling within the relevant jurisdiction, and applying that knowledge to practical implementation choices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated security and compliance strategy. This means embedding security and compliance considerations into the entire cloud lifecycle, from initial design and deployment to ongoing operations and decommissioning. Specifically, leveraging automated security controls, continuous monitoring, and regular compliance audits ensures that the cloud environment adheres to established regulations. This approach aligns with best practices for cloud security and governance, which emphasize A. Security by design and compliance by design philosophy. By utilizing tools and processes that enforce security policies and continuously assess compliance posture, the administrator can demonstrate due diligence and mitigate risks effectively. This proactive stance is crucial for meeting the stringent requirements of regulatory frameworks that govern data privacy and cloud service provision. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of deployment over security and compliance checks. This can lead to the accidental exposure of sensitive data, misconfigurations that create vulnerabilities, and ultimately, non-compliance with regulations. Such an approach demonstrates a failure to understand the fundamental responsibilities of a cloud administrator, which includes safeguarding data and adhering to legal mandates. This can result in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on manual security reviews and ad hoc compliance checks. While manual reviews have a place, they are often insufficient in dynamic cloud environments. This approach is prone to human error, can be time-consuming, and may miss subtle but critical security flaws or compliance deviations. It fails to establish a consistent and reliable mechanism for maintaining security and compliance, leaving the organization vulnerable to evolving threats and regulatory changes. A third incorrect approach is to assume that the cloud provider's compliance certifications automatically cover all aspects of the organization's data and applications. While cloud providers offer robust security and compliance frameworks, the responsibility for data security and application-level compliance ultimately rests with the customer. This shared responsibility model is a critical concept in cloud computing. Failing to understand and implement one's own responsibilities can lead to significant compliance gaps and security breaches. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud administration must adopt a risk-based approach to decision-making. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing their impact, and implementing controls to mitigate them. Key element of this process is staying abreast of the relevant regulatory landscape and understanding how it applies to cloud services. Professionals should prioritize solutions that offer automation for security and compliance tasks, enabling continuous monitoring and rapid response to incidents. Building a culture of security and compliance within the team, and fostering collaboration with legal and compliance departments are also essential. When faced with competing demands, professionals should always err on the side of caution, ensuring that security and compliance are not compromised for the sake of expediency. Documenting all decisions and actions taken is also a critical aspect of demonstrating due diligence. Question 2. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a public cloud provider offering significantly lower upfront infrastructure costs is appealing for a new government project. However, the project involves handling sensitive citizen data that falls under strict U.S. federal regulations, including FISMA and NIST SB 800-53. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory compliance for this scenario? Option A. Choose a public cloud provider based on positive market reputation and user reviews, without specific verification of their compliance with U.S. federal regulations for sensitive data. Option B. Opt for an on-premises solution to avoid the complexities of cloud compliance, despite the higher initial capital expenditure and ongoing operational overhead. Option C. Select the public cloud provider with the lowest upfront cost, assuming that general industry security certifications are sufficient for federal data handling. Option D. Prioritize selecting a public cloud provider that can demonstrate explicit compliance with FISMA and relevant NIST SB 800-53 controls, even if it incurs slightly higher initial costs, and conduct thorough due diligence on their security posture and audit capabilities. Correct answer is C. Select the public cloud provider with the lowest upfront cost, assuming that general industry security certifications are sufficient for federal data handling. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the immediate cost savings of a public cloud solution with the long-term security and compliance requirements mandated by U.S. federal regulations, specifically the Federal Information Security Management Act, FISMA, and its associated National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, special publications, SB, like SB 800-53. The challenge lies in ensuring that the chosen cloud service provider, CSP, can meet the stringent security controls and audit requirements necessary for handling government data, even if initial cost projections favor a less compliant option. Careful judgment is required to avoid compromising national security or violating federal law for short-term financial gain. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes compliance with U.S. federal regulations, such as FISMA and NIST SB 800-53, which are legally binding for government agencies and contractors. This approach involves a thorough due diligence process to verify the CSP's adherence to security controls, data protection measures, and auditability requirements. By selecting a CSP that can demonstrate compliance, the organization mitigates the risk of security breaches, data loss, and regulatory penalties, thereby safeguarding sensitive information and maintaining public trust. This proactive stance aligns with the ethical responsibility of cloud administrators to protect data and uphold legal obligations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the lowest upfront cost, without verifying the CSP's compliance with FISMA and NIST SB 800-53, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to the use of a CSP that does not implement the required security controls, leaving sensitive government data vulnerable to unauthorized access, disclosure, or destruction. Such a failure would directly violate FISMA, which mandates that federal agencies implement adequate information security programs. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the responsibility to protect government information and the citizens it serves. Another incorrect approach that involves assuming a CSP's compliance based on general industry certifications, without specific verification against FISMA and NIST SB 800-53 requirements, is also professionally unacceptable. While general certifications like ISO 27001 are valuable, they do not automatically guarantee adherence to the specific, often more rigorous, controls required by U.S. federal regulations. This assumption could lead to a false sense of security and expose the organization to the same risks as the first incorrect approach. It is a failure to exercise due diligence and a potential violation of the least privilege principle by not adequately assessing the security posture of the chosen environment. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a risk-based approach that integrates security and compliance requirements from the outset of any cloud adoption decision. This means 1. Clearly defining the data sensitivity and regulatory compliance obligations, e.g., FISMA, HIPAA, CMMC. 2. Identifying potential CSPs and thoroughly vetting their security certifications, audit reports, and contractual agreements against these specific requirements. 3. Conducting a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis that includes the total cost of ownership, factoring in compliance efforts, potential remediation costs, and the risk of penalties. 4. Prioritizing CSPs that can provide evidence of compliance with relevant U.S. federal regulations, even if their initial cost is slightly higher, as the long-term cost of a breach or noncompliance far outweighs upfront savings. Question 3. The control framework reveals that a business unit wishes to rapidly deploy a new SaaS application for customer relationship management. This application will handle sensitive customer data. The IT security team has not yet had the opportunity to conduct a full security assessment of the vendor's platform, and the compliance team is concerned about potential data residency requirements. Project manager is pushing for immediate deployment to meet a critical business deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Delay the deployment until a comprehensive security assessment is completed by the IT security team, and the compliance team has confirmed adherence to all relevant data residency regulations. Option B. Proceed with the deployment, but implement enhanced monitoring and logging to detect any security incidents and address compliance concerns post-deployment. Option C. Deploy the application to a limited set of users for initial testing, while simultaneously initiating the security and compliance review processes. Option D. Deploy the application, relying on the vendor's stated compliance certifications and security documentation, and inform the business unit of potential risks. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the deployment, but implement enhanced monitoring and logging to detect any security incidents and address compliance concerns post-deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with robust security and compliance requirements. The challenge lies in ensuring that new cloud services, while offering business advantages, do not inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities or violate regulatory mandates. Careful judgment is required to assess the risk profile of each new service and implement appropriate controls without stifling agility. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive, risk-based assessment aligned with established security principles and regulatory expectations. By engaging security and compliance teams early in the lifecycle of new cloud services, potential issues can be identified and mitigated before deployment. This aligns with the principle of security by design and ensures that the organization remains compliant with relevant regulations, such as those governing data privacy and protection, by embedding compliance checks into the service evaluation process. An incorrect approach that bypasses established security review processes is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of internal security policies and potentially regulatory requirements that mandate due diligence in deploying new technologies. It creates an unacceptable risk of data breaches, service disruptions, and non-compliance, leading to significant financial penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on vendor assurances without independent verification is also professionally unsound. While vendor certifications are valuable, they do not absolve the organization of its responsibility to ensure that the cloud service meets its specific security and compliance needs. This oversight can lead to misconfigurations, inadequate data protection, and ultimately, regulatory noncompliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should include identifying the cloud service and its intended use, understanding the data it will process and its sensitivity, evaluating potential threats and vulnerabilities, determining the applicable regulatory requirements, and implementing appropriate security controls and compliance checks. Collaboration between IT, security, compliance, and business units is crucial throughout this process. Question 4. Research into the deployment of a new customer-facing analytics platform hosted on a public cloud infrastructure reveals a critical need to ensure data privacy and compliance with U.S. federal data protection mandates. The development team is pushing for an expedited release to meet market demand, suggesting a streamlined deployment process that prioritizes speed over exhaustive security validation during the initial rollout. The operations team is concerned about potential vulnerabilities and the integrity of the data being processed, considering the regulatory landscape and best practices for cloud administration. Which deployment strategy best balances rapid delivery with robust security and compliance? Option A. Deploy the platform with a focus solely on functional testing to ensure all features operate as expected, deferring all security and compliance validation until after the platform has been live for a significant period. Option B. Prioritize speed by deploying the platform directly to production with minimal security checks, relying on a comprehensive post-deployment security audit scheduled for 1 month after the initial release to identify and address any issues. Option C. Implement a phased rollout strategy where the platform is deployed to a limited set of internal users for beta testing, with automated security scans and compliance checks integrated into the CI/CD pipeline. Post-beta, gradually expand access while continuously monitoring for security anomalies and conducting regular compliance audits. Option D. Deploy the platform with basic security configurations, but bypass automated security scans and compliance checks during the CI/CD process, assuming that the cloud provider's inherent security features are sufficient for initial deployment. The correct answer is C. Implement a phased rollout strategy where the platform is deployed to a limited set of internal users for beta testing, with automated security scans and compliance checks integrated into the CI/CD pipeline. Post-beta, gradually expand access while continuously monitoring for security anomalies and conducting regular compliance audits. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and feature iteration with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in navigating the inherent tension between agility and control, especially when dealing with sensitive data or regulated environments. A hasty deployment without proper security validation can lead to significant vulnerabilities, data breaches, and regulatory penalties. Conversely, an overly rigid process can stifle innovation and competitive advantage. The correct approach, which involves a phased rollout with continuous security monitoring and compliance checks integrated into the CI/CD pipeline, represents best professional practice because it proactively addresses potential risks. This methodology aligns with the principles of DevSecOps, embedding security and compliance as integral parts of the development and operational lifecycle. By automating security checks, performing regular audits, and ensuring adherence to established compliance frameworks, such as those relevant to U.S. federal regulations for cloud services, if applicable to the exam scope. This approach minimizes the attack surface and ensures that the deployed cloud services meet all necessary security and regulatory requirements from the outset and throughout their lifecycle. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust, avoiding costly remediation, and demonstrating due diligence to regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach that bypasses security reviews for faster deployment is professionally unacceptable due to direct regulatory and ethical failures. It violates the principle of least privilege and fails to implement necessary safeguards, potentially exposing sensitive data to unauthorized access or modification. This directly contravenes regulations that mandate data protection and security controls. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on post-deployment security audits, is also flawed. While audits are necessary, relying on them as the primary security mechanism is reactive rather than proactive. This delay in identifying and rectifying vulnerabilities increases the risk of a breach occurring before detection, leading to significant financial and reputational damage and potential noncompliance with ongoing monitoring requirements. A third incorrect approach, which focuses only on functional testing without considering security implications, ignores a critical dimension of cloud service delivery. Functionality alone does not guarantee a secure or compliant service, and neglecting security testing during development is a fundamental oversight that can lead to severe breaches and regulatory noncompliance. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a risk-based approach. This means identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing their likelihood and impact, and then implementing appropriate controls. Integrating security and compliance into every stage of the cloud service lifecycle, from design and development to deployment and operation, is paramount. This involves establishing clear policies, implementing automated checks, conducting regular training, and fostering a culture of security awareness among all team members. When faced with competing priorities, professionals must always default to the approach that best safeguards data, maintains compliance, and upholds ethical responsibilities, even if it requires a slightly longer deployment timeline. Question 5. Compliance review shows that several new cloud-based applications are being deployed by development teams without explicit verification of their adherence to the organization's established data residency policies and U.S. federal privacy regulations. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the cloud administration team? Option A. Immediately halt all new cloud application deployments until a comprehensive review of all existing and future applications can be completed. Option B. Conduct a detailed audit of the newly deployed applications to identify specific services and their data handling characteristics, verifying their alignment with data residency requirements and relevant U.S. privacy laws before proceeding with further deployments. Option C. Request a general compliance report from the cloud service provider and consider it sufficient evidence of adherence to all relevant regulations. Option D. Assume that all services deployed within the organization's primary cloud account automatically meet compliance standards and focus on other operational tasks. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed audit of the newly deployed applications to identify specific services and their data handling characteristics, verifying their alignment with data residency requirements and relevant U.S. privacy laws before proceeding with further deployments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing cloud security posture within a regulated environment. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative to maintain compliance with data residency and privacy regulations. The compliance review highlights a potential gap where the current cloud architecture might not fully align with the organization's stated data handling policies, creating a risk of regulatory noncompliance and potential data breaches. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause and implement effective remediation without unduly hindering business agility. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough investigation into the specific services being deployed and their data handling characteristics. This includes verifying that the chosen cloud regions and service configurations adhere to the organization's data residency policies, which are often dictated by regulations like GDPR, if applicable to the exam's implied jurisdiction, which is U.S.-centric for 210-455. It also necessitates confirming that the data processing activities within these services meet the privacy requirements stipulated by relevant U.S. federal and state laws. This proactive validation ensures that the cloud environment remains compliant by design, aligning technical implementation with regulatory mandates and organizational policy. This represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, evidence-based approach to compliance, directly addressing the findings of the compliance review and mitigating future risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that all services deployed within the organization's primary cloud account automatically comply with data residency and privacy regulations. This is a failure to exercise due diligence. Regulations often have specific requirements for data location and processing that may not be met by default configurations or by services that have different data handling characteristics. This approach risks violating data residency laws and privacy statutes by allowing data to be processed or stored in unauthorized locations or in ways that compromise user privacy. Another incorrect approach is to immediately halt all new service deployments without understanding the specific nature of the compliance gap. While caution is understandable, an indiscriminate pause can disrupt business operations and innovation. This approach fails to address the root cause of the compliance issue and can lead to operational inefficiencies. It also misses the opportunity to identify and implement targeted solutions that allow for continued compliant service deployment. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the cloud provider's generic compliance statements without independent verification. While cloud providers offer robust compliance frameworks, the responsibility for ensuring that specific service configurations and data handling practices meet the organization's unique regulatory obligations ultimately rests with the customer. This approach can lead to a false sense of security and may result in non-compliance if the organization's specific use cases fall outside the scope of the provider's general assurances, or if misconfigurations occur. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to cloud compliance. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to their organization, e.g., U.S. federal laws like HIPAA for healthcare data, or state-specific privacy laws like the CCPA. When a compliance review identifies potential issues, the first step is to gather detailed information about the services in question, their data flows, and their configurations. This information should then be cross-referenced against established data residency policies and privacy requirements. If a discrepancy is found, the professional should work with relevant stakeholders, e.g., legal, security, development teams, to implement corrective actions. This might involve reconfiguring services, selecting different cloud regions, or implementing additional security controls. Continuous monitoring and regular audits are crucial to maintain an ongoing state of compliance. Question 6. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy in how customer data is being stored and accessed within the cloud environment, raising concerns about compliance with data residency requirements and the principle of least privilege. Which of the following actions best addresses these findings from a regulatory compliance and security best practice perspective? Option A. Rely on the cloud service provider's standard compliance certifications as sufficient evidence that all data residency and access control requirements are met without further investigation. Option B. Review the cloud service provider's documentation to confirm their data center locations and compare them against the organization's data residency obligations, while simultaneously auditing access logs to ensure only authorized personnel have access to sensitive data based on their roles. Option C. Update the organization's internal data handling policy to reflect current practices, without making any immediate changes to the cloud environment's configuration. Option D. Immediately implement stricter firewall rules to block all external access to the data storage, assuming this will resolve both data residency and access control issues. Correct answer is B. Review the cloud service provider's documentation to confirm their data center locations and compare them against the organization's data residency obligations, while simultaneously auditing access logs to ensure only authorized personnel have access to sensitive data based on their roles. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential misconfiguration in the cloud environment related to data residency and access controls, specifically concerning sensitive customer data. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of regulatory compliance frameworks relevant to cloud administration, alongside technical expertise. The administrator must balance operational efficiency with stringent legal and ethical obligations to protect customer data. The challenge lies in interpreting audit findings, understanding the implications of noncompliance, and implementing corrective actions that are both technically sound and legally defensible within the specified jurisdiction. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the cloud service provider's shared responsibility model and the specific contractual agreements in place. It necessitates understanding the relevant data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if the jurisdiction were EU, or relevant U.S. federal/state laws if U.S., and ensuring that the cloud configuration aligns with these requirements. This includes verifying that data is stored and processed in approved geographic locations, and that access controls are granular and enforced according to the principle of least privilege. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the audit findings by prioritizing compliance and data security, thereby mitigating legal risks, maintaining customer trust, and upholding ethical standards. It demonstrates a proactive and responsible approach to cloud governance. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings as a minor technical issue without understanding the underlying regulatory implications. For instance, simply reconfiguring access controls without verifying data residency would be a failure to address the full scope of the audit. This would represent a regulatory failure by potentially violating data residency laws, which can lead to significant fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to assume the cloud provider is solely responsible for compliance without validating their controls against the organization's specific regulatory obligations. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to understand the shared responsibility model, leading to potential ethical and legal breaches. A third incorrect approach might be to implement a quick fix that bypasses proper change management and documentation procedures. This not only fails to address the root cause, but also creates an audit trail that could be viewed as evasive, further exacerbating the regulatory and ethical concerns. Professionals should adopt a systematic decision-making process when faced with such audit findings. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the data and the organization's operations. 2. Thoroughly analyzing the audit report to identify the precise nature of the noncompliance. 3. Consulting relevant documentation, including service provider agreements and internal policies. 4. Developing a remediation plan that addresses both technical and compliance aspects. 5. Implementing the plan with proper change control and documentation. 6. Verifying the effectiveness of the remediation through retesting or follow-up audits. This structured approach ensures that all aspects of the issue are considered, leading to robust and compliant solutions. Question 7. Which approach would be most effective for introducing a new cloud-based application that handles sensitive customer data, ensuring both rapid deployment and adherence to U.S. federal regulatory frameworks for cloud administration? Option A. Conduct a thorough security and compliance assessment, including threat modeling and control mapping, before initiating any deployment activities, and integrate findings into the application's architecture and operational procedures. Option B. Prioritize immediate deployment to meet business objectives, relying on the cloud provider's inherent security features and planning to address compliance and security gaps through post-deployment patching and audits. Option C. Focus solely on functional testing and user acceptance, deferring all security and compliance considerations to a later stage after the application has been fully adopted by end users. Option D. Deploy the application with minimal security configurations to expedite the process, assuming that any necessary compliance measures can be retroactively applied once the application is live and operational. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough security and compliance assessment, including threat modeling and control mapping, before initiating any deployment activities, and integrate findings into the application's architecture and operational procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective strategy for implementing a new cloud-based application, while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's operations, which for this exam is assumed to be U.S. federal regulations relevant to cloud environments. A hasty or poorly considered approach can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, data breaches, and noncompliance, resulting in severe financial penalties and reputational damage. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive security and compliance assessment before deployment. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are fundamental to U.S. federal regulations like NIST SB 800-53 and FedRAMP. By integrating security and compliance requirements into the initial planning and design phases, organizations can proactively identify and mitigate risks, ensuring that the application meets all necessary standards from the outset. This proactive stance is not only more cost-effective in the long run, but also demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to protecting sensitive data, which is a core ethical and regulatory obligation. An incorrect approach that bypasses or minimizes pre-deployment security and compliance reviews is professionally unacceptable. For instance, proceeding with deployment based solely on functional requirements without a thorough risk assessment would violate the principle of least privilege and could expose the system to unauthorized access, a direct contravention of regulations like HIPAA, if applicable to the data, or FISMA. Similarly, assuming that cloud provider compliance guarantees application-level compliance is a critical error. The shared responsibility model dictates that the customer is responsible for securing their data and applications *, the cloud, Relying on post-deployment remediation is reactive and significantly increases the likelihood of breaches and noncompliance, as vulnerabilities may have already been exploited. The professional decision-making process should involve a structured, risk-based methodology. This begins with understanding the data sensitivity and regulatory landscape. Next, a thorough threat modeling exercise should be conducted to identify potential attack vectors. Security controls and compliance requirements must then be mapped to these threats and risks. Finally, a phased deployment strategy, incorporating continuous monitoring and auditing, should be implemented, with a clear go/no-go decision point based on the successful validation of security and compliance controls. Question 8. The review process indicates that a new cloud-based application is being developed for internal use, which will handle sensitive employee data. To accelerate the development timeline, the team is considering bypassing the standard security review process for initial deployment, planning to address security concerns post-launch. Which approach best aligns with the principles of secure cloud administration and regulatory compliance? Option A. Rely on the cloud provider's default security configurations, assuming they are sufficient for protecting sensitive employee data. Option B. Defer the security review and implementation of encryption and access controls until after the application has been deployed and is in production. Option C. Allow the development team to implement their own ad hoc security measures as they deem appropriate during the development phase. Option D. Mandate the use of approved encryption methods and granular access controls for all new cloud service deployments, including this application, before it goes live. Correct answer is D. Mandate the use of approved encryption methods and granular access controls for all new cloud service deployments, including this application, before it goes live. Explanation. The review process indicates a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. In the context of the 210-455 exam, which focuses on Cisco cloud administration, this scenario highlights the critical importance of understanding and implementing security best practices within a cloud environment, specifically concerning data encryption and access control. Professionals must navigate the tension between agility and security, ensuring that new cloud deployments adhere to established security policies and regulatory requirements without unduly hindering innovation. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and policy-driven method to security. By mandating the use of approved encryption methods and granular access controls for all new cloud service deployments, administrators ensure that data is protected both at rest and in transit, and that only authorized personnel can access sensitive information. This aligns with general cloud security principles and is implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate data protection and privacy. This approach represents best professional practice because it embeds security into the deployment lifecycle, minimizing the risk of vulnerabilities and compliance breaches from the outset. It fosters a culture of security awareness and responsibility. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately address the inherent risks associated with cloud deployments. One incorrect approach might involve relying solely on the cloud provider's default security settings. This is professionally unacceptable because default settings are often generic and may not meet the specific security and compliance needs of the organization or the data being handled. It represents a failure to perform due diligence and a potential violation of internal security policies and external regulations that require tailored security measures. Another incorrect approach could be to defer security reviews until after a service is deployed. This is a reactive and highly risky strategy. It creates a window of vulnerability where sensitive data could be exposed or compromised before security measures are implemented. This significantly increases the likelihood of security incidents and regulatory noncompliance, as it violates the principle of security by design. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a security-first mindset. This involves understanding the organization's security posture, relevant regulatory requirements, and the specific risks associated with each cloud deployment. Before any new service is deployed, a thorough risk assessment should be conducted, and security controls, including encryption and access management, should be defined and implemented. This proactive approach ensures that security is an integral part of the cloud administration process, rather than an afterthought. Question 9. The analysis reveals that a US-based financial services firm is considering integrating a new third-party SaaS application for customer relationship management. The application will handle sensitive customer financial data. The IT security team needs to determine the most appropriate method for integration to ensure compliance with U.S. financial regulations and data privacy laws. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional best practices for this scenario? Option A. Integrate the SaaS application and then address security configurations and compliance checks as part of a post-implementation review. Option B. Immediately integrate the SaaS application to leverage its new features for customer engagement, assuming the SaaS provider is reputable and compliant. Option C. Conduct a thorough security assessment of the SaaS provider. Review their compliance certifications, e.g., SOC 2 Type Roman 2, and ensure the contract includes robust data protection and incident response clauses before integration. Option D. Rely solely on the SaaS provider's self-attestation of compliance with relevant financial regulations and data privacy laws without independent verification. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough security assessment of the SaaS provider, review their compliance certifications, e.g., SOC 2 Type Roman 2, and ensure the contract includes robust data protection and incident response clauses before integration. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with the imperative of maintaining robust security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method for integrating a new third-party SaaS application into the existing cloud environment. This requires a deep understanding of the specific regulatory framework governing cloud services in the relevant jurisdiction, assumed to be U.S. regulations for this exam context, as per typical Cisco exam scope, unless otherwise specified. Careful judgment is needed to select an approach that not only meets functional requirements, but also adheres to data privacy, security, and vendor management regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough risk assessment and due diligence process. This aligns with U.S. regulatory frameworks such as NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, guidelines, which emphasize a risk-based approach to cloud security and data protection. Specifically, conducting a comprehensive security assessment of the SaaS provider and ensuring contractual agreements include robust data protection clauses are critical steps mandated by regulations like HIPAA for healthcare data, or GDPR-like principles if applicable to the data being handled, even within a U.S. context. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of data breaches, compliance violations, and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that bypasses security reviews or relies solely on the SaaS provider's self-attestation of compliance is professionally unacceptable. This failure to perform independent due diligence directly contravenes regulatory expectations for responsible data stewardship. It exposes the organization to significant legal and financial risks, including fines for non-compliance with data privacy laws, e.g., CCPA in California, or sector-specific regulations. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of diligence in protecting sensitive data entrusted to the organization. Another incorrect approach, such as immediately integrating the application without any security configuration or policy enforcement, ignores the shared responsibility model inherent in cloud computing and regulatory requirements for maintaining a secure environment. This oversight can lead to vulnerabilities that are exploited, resulting in data loss or unauthorized access and subsequent regulatory penalties. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the data sensitivity and regulatory requirements associated with the application's intended use. This should be followed by a structured risk assessment process, including evaluating the SaaS provider's security posture, reviewing their compliance certifications, and negotiating appropriate contractual terms. Finally, implementing the application should involve configuring security controls and monitoring mechanisms to ensure ongoing compliance and security. Question 10. Governance review demonstrates that a new third-party cloud service, intended to enhance customer engagement, has been integrated into the existing infrastructure without a formal security assessment or verification of the vendor's compliance certifications against relevant data protection regulations. The integration was expedited to meet a tight marketing deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this situation? Option A. Accept the vendor's self-attestation of compliance and focus on monitoring the service for any immediate security alerts. Option B. Immediately suspend the third-party service until a comprehensive security and compliance audit is completed and implement necessary controls. Option C. Proceed with the integration as is, assuming the vendor has met all regulatory requirements, and address any identified issues post-launch. Option D. Implement basic security monitoring on the integrated service and schedule a full audit for the next fiscal quarter. The correct answer is B. Immediately suspend the third-party service until a comprehensive security and compliance audit is completed and implement necessary controls. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with the imperative of maintaining robust security and compliance. The pressure to deliver new services quickly can lead to shortcuts or a lack of thorough vetting of third-party integrations, potentially exposing the organization to significant risks. The challenge lies in identifying and mitigating these risks without stifling business agility. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated security and compliance posture. It involves establishing clear policies and procedures for evaluating and approving third-party cloud services. This includes conducting thorough due diligence on the vendor's security practices, data handling policies, and compliance certifications relevant to the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's operations. Furthermore, it necessitates implementing technical controls to monitor and manage the integration, ensuring data privacy and integrity are maintained throughout the service lifecycle. This approach aligns with the principles of least privilege and defense in depth, which are fundamental to secure cloud administration and regulatory compliance. By embedding security and compliance into the integration process from the outset, organizations can prevent potential breaches and avoid regulatory penalties. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing speed of deployment over security and compliance. This often manifests as a move fast and break things mentality, where third-party services are integrated without adequate vetting. This directly violates regulatory requirements that mandate due diligence and risk assessment for any service handling sensitive data. Such an approach creates significant ethical and legal liabilities, potentially leading to data breaches, loss of customer trust, and substantial fines. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the third-party vendor's self-attestation of compliance without independent verification. While vendor assurances are a starting point, regulatory frameworks typically require organizations to perform their own risk assessments and ensure that the vendor's controls adequately meet the organization's specific compliance obligations. Blindly trusting vendor claims without due diligence is a failure to exercise professional responsibility and can result in non-compliance. A third incorrect approach is to implement security controls only after a service has been integrated and is in production. This reactive stance is inherently risky. It means that vulnerabilities may exist and be exploited during the period before controls are in place. Regulatory guidance consistently advocates for a preventative, rather than a curative approach to security and compliance. Delaying security measures until after integration increases the likelihood of a security incident and subsequent regulatory scrutiny. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud administration must adopt a risk-based approach. This involves understanding the organization's regulatory obligations and the potential impact of integrating third-party services. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying regulatory requirements applicable to the data and services being handled. 2. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of the third-party service, including its security posture, data privacy practices, and compliance certifications. 3. Establishing clear criteria for approving third-party integrations, ensuring alignment with organizational policies and regulatory mandates. 4. Implementing appropriate technical and administrative controls to manage the risks associated with the integration. 5. Continuously monitoring the integrated service for security and compliance deviations. This systematic process ensures that innovation and business objectives are pursued responsibly, with security and compliance as foundational elements. Question 11. Operational review demonstrates a critical customer-facing application hosted on a cloud platform is experiencing intermittent performance degradation and occasional unresponsiveness, impacting user experience and potentially business operations. The incident management team is under pressure to restore full functionality immediately. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the cloud administration team to take? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis by examining application logs, system metrics, and network telemetry, while simultaneously implementing temporary, non-disruptive performance enhancements if identified, and documenting all findings and actions. Option B. Immediately roll back the application and its underlying infrastructure to the last known stable configuration without further investigation to ensure service restoration. Option C. Escalate the incident directly to the cloud service provider's support team, requesting an immediate fix without providing detailed diagnostic information. Option D. Apply a series of rapid, unverified configuration changes to various system components in an attempt to quickly resolve the performance issues. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis by examining application logs, system metrics, and network telemetry, while simultaneously implementing temporary, non-disruptive performance enhancements if identified, and documenting all findings and actions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration where a critical service outage impacts end users, necessitating a rapid and effective response. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of restoring service with the need to adhere to established operational procedures and regulatory compliance, particularly concerning data integrity and security. The pressure to resolve the issue quickly can lead to shortcuts that might compromise these critical aspects. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation that prioritizes identifying the root cause of the outage without compromising data integrity or security. This aligns with best practices in IT service management ITSM frameworks such as ITIL, which emphasize structured incident management. Specifically, it involves isolating the affected components, analyzing logs and telemetry data, and consulting documentation and support resources. This methodical approach ensures that the resolution is not only swift but also sustainable, preventing recurrence and maintaining compliance with any relevant data protection regulations that mandate secure and auditable incident response. The focus on understanding the why behind the failure, rather than just a superficial fix, is paramount for long-term operational stability and adherence to service-level agreements, SLAs. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately reverting to a previous known good state without a thorough root cause analysis. While this might restore service quickly, it fails to address the underlying issue, potentially leading to repeated outages and masking critical system vulnerabilities. From a regulatory perspective, this could violate data integrity mandates if the rollback process is not carefully managed and audited, or if it leads to data loss or corruption that is not properly documented or remediated. Another incorrect approach is to implement a quick fix or workaround that bypasses standard security protocols or data validation checks. This is highly problematic as it introduces significant security risks, potentially exposing sensitive data or creating new attack vectors. Ethically and regulatorily, this is unacceptable as it directly contravenes principles of data security and privacy, and could lead to severe compliance violations and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach is to escalate the issue to a vendor without providing sufficient diagnostic information. While vendor support is crucial, a lack of initial investigation by the internal team means the vendor may not have the necessary context to diagnose the problem efficiently. This can lead to prolonged downtime and potentially higher support costs, and in a regulated environment, it demonstrates a failure to exercise due diligence in managing the cloud service. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response framework. This involves clear steps for detection, diagnosis, resolution, and recovery. The decision-making process should prioritize data integrity and security throughout the incident lifecycle. When faced with an outage, the first step is always to contain the impact, followed by a thorough root cause analysis. Documenting every step taken, including any deviations from standard procedures, is critical for auditing and compliance. Escalation should be a considered step, supported by gathered evidence, rather than an initial reaction. Continuous learning from incidents. through post-incident reviews is essential for improving operational resilience and ensuring ongoing compliance. Question 12. During the evaluation of a new cloud-based application deployment that will handle sensitive customer data, an administrator needs to grant access to a team of developers responsible for its ongoing maintenance and updates. The primary business requirement is to enable rapid deployment and iterative development cycles, which approach best balances the need for agility with robust security and compliance requirements. Option A. Define granular IAM roles that grant only the specific permissions required for development and maintenance tasks, and assign these roles to the developer team. Option B. Implement network access control lists, ACL, at the edge of the cloud network to restrict access to the application's resources, assuming internal users are trusted. Option C. Grant the entire developer team broad administrative privileges to the cloud environment to ensure they have unrestricted access for quick changes. Option D. Assign a single, highly permissive role to the developer team that covers all potential maintenance and update scenarios, regardless of individual need. The correct answer is A. Define granular IAM roles that grant only the specific permissions required for development and maintenance tasks, and assign these roles to the developer team. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and resource provisioning with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The pressure to deliver services quickly can lead to shortcuts that inadvertently expose the organization to risks. The administrator must navigate technical requirements, business demands, and the overarching regulatory landscape without compromising data integrity or privacy. The challenge lies in identifying the most secure and compliant method for granting access, especially when dealing with sensitive data or regulated workloads. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging the principle of least privilege, a fundamental tenet of cloud security and compliance. This means granting only the minimum necessary permissions for users or services to perform their designated tasks. In a cloud environment, this is typically achieved through granular identity and access management (IAM) policies. By defining specific roles and assigning them to users or groups, administrators ensure that access is limited to the resources and actions absolutely required. This approach directly aligns with regulatory frameworks that mandate data protection and access control, such as those requiring segregation of duties and preventing unauthorized access. It minimizes the attack surface and reduces the likelihood of accidental or malicious data breaches. Incorrect approaches analysis. Granting broad administrative privileges to all users, even for seemingly routine tasks, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This violates the principle of least privilege and creates an unacceptable risk of unauthorized access, data modification, or deletion. Such an approach would be non-compliant with data protection regulations that require strict access controls and audit trails. Assigning a single, overly permissive role to a group of users without further segmentation of responsibilities is also problematic. While it might seem efficient, it fails to enforce segregation of duties, a critical compliance requirement in many industries. If one user within that group misuses their access, the entire group's actions are implicated, making auditing and accountability difficult. This also increases the risk of accidental data exposure or modification by individuals who do not require such broad access. Implementing access controls solely at the network perimeter, without considering identity-based access within the cloud environment, is insufficient. While network security is important, it does not address the internal threats or the need for granular control over resource access based on user identity and role. Modern cloud security and compliance frameworks emphasize identity as the new perimeter, and relying only on network-level controls leaves significant gaps. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to cloud administration. This involves understanding the sensitivity of the data and workloads, the potential impact of a breach, and the relevant regulatory requirements. Before granting any access, administrators should ask, what is the absolute minimum access required for this user/service to perform its function? They should then consult their organization's security policies and compliance guidelines to ensure the chosen method aligns with best practices and legal obligations. Regular auditing of access logs and periodic reviews of assigned permissions are crucial to maintaining a secure and compliant cloud environment. Question 13. The audit findings indicate that the current network segmentation strategy within the cloud environment may not adequately isolate sensitive customer data from less critical internal applications, potentially exposing it to unauthorized access. What is the most appropriate immediate action to address this finding? Option A. Assume the current configuration is sufficient and document the finding as a low-priority item for future review during the next scheduled security assessment. Option B. Immediately implement a blanket denial of all network traffic between customer data segments and internal application segments until further analysis can be performed. Option C. Update the cloud provider's default security policies to a more restrictive setting across all network interfaces. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all Network Security Group rules, NACL, and VPC configurations to verify adherence to the principle of least privilege and data isolation requirements. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of all Network Security Group rules, NACL, and VPC configurations to verify adherence to the principle of least privilege and data isolation requirements. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential misconfiguration in the network segmentation strategy, which is a critical component of cloud security and compliance. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of cloud networking principles, security best practices, and the specific regulatory framework governing data handling within the cloud environment relevant to the 210-455 exam. The administrator must balance operational efficiency with robust security to prevent unauthorized access and data breaches, all while adhering to compliance mandates. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the existing network segmentation policies and their implementation within the cloud infrastructure. This includes verifying that security groups, network access control lists, NACL, and virtual private cloud, VPC, configurations are correctly defined to isolate sensitive data and workloads. Best professional practice dictates a proactive and systematic approach to security configuration, ensuring that segmentation aligns with the principle of least privilege and minimizes the attack surface. This directly supports regulatory compliance by demonstrating due diligence in protecting data integrity and confidentiality, as mandated by frameworks that emphasize data segregation and access control. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the audit findings without proper investigation, assuming the existing configuration is adequate. This demonstrates a failure to acknowledge potential vulnerabilities and a disregard for the audit process, which is a key component of maintaining a secure and compliant cloud environment. Such an approach could lead to regulatory violations by failing to implement necessary security controls, potentially resulting in data breaches and significant financial and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to implement broad, overly restrictive segmentation rules that hinder legitimate business operations. While security is paramount, it must be balanced with usability. Overly restrictive rules can lead to operational inefficiencies and may not be aligned with the specific compliance requirements, which often allow for necessary data flows under controlled conditions. This approach fails to apply a nuanced understanding of security principles and regulatory intent. A further incorrect approach is to rely solely on vendor-provided default security configurations without customization. While vendor defaults offer a baseline, they are often not sufficient for specific organizational needs or regulatory mandates. Failing to tailor security settings to the unique risk profile and compliance obligations of the organization represents a significant lapse in professional responsibility and a potential regulatory failure. The professional reasoning process for this situation should involve 1. Acknowledging and prioritizing the audit findings. 2. Conducting a detailed technical assessment of the current network segmentation. 3. Consulting relevant cloud security best practices and the specific regulatory framework. 4. Developing and implementing a remediation plan that addresses identified gaps while ensuring operational continuity. 5. Documenting all findings, actions, and justifications for compliance and future reference. Question 14. System analysis indicates a healthcare organization is migrating its patient record system to a public cloud environment to improve scalability and accessibility. The primary concern is ensuring compliance with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, for electronic protected health information, E-FI. The development team is pushing for a rapid deployment to meet urgent business needs, suggesting a focus on core application functionality first, with security and compliance measures to be addressed in a subsequent phase. Which of the following approaches best ensures immediate and ongoing HIPAA compliance for ePHI in the cloud? Option A. Select a cloud provider that offers a HIPAA-eligible service offering. Configure robust encryption for data at rest and in transit. Implement strict role-based access controls with multi-factor authentication. And establish comprehensive audit logging for all ePHI access and modifications. Option B. Deploy the patient record system using a cloud provider that explicitly states they are not HIPAA compliant, but implement data anonymization techniques before data is ingested into the cloud to mitigate risk. Option C. Prioritize rapid deployment of the patient record system by leveraging the cloud provider's standard security features, assuming they meet general industry best practices, and plan to review HIPAA compliance after the system is operational. Option D. Implement encryption only for data in transit, as this is the most common vector for breaches, and rely on the cloud provider's network security to protect data at rest, while deferring granular access control implementation to a later stage. The correct answer is A. Select a cloud provider that offers a HIPAA-eligible service offering. Configure robust encryption for data at rest and in transit. Implement strict role-based access controls with multi-factor authentication. And establish comprehensive audit logging for all ePHI access and modifications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and feature iteration with the imperative to maintain data privacy and security in compliance with U.S. federal regulations, specifically those pertaining to protected health information, FI, under HIPAA. The professional challenge lies in understanding the nuances of HIPAA security rule, which mandates administrative, physical, and technical safeguards, and applying them to a dynamic cloud environment where infrastructure is abstracted and shared. The urgency of business needs can create pressure to bypass or shortcut compliance measures, leading to significant legal and financial repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment and the implementation of appropriate technical safeguards, specifically focusing on encryption of data at rest and in transit, robust access controls, and audit logging. This aligns directly with the HIPAA security rules requirement for covered entities and business associates to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of electronic PHI (EFI). Encryption ensures that even if unauthorized access occurs, the data remains unreadable. Strong access controls, like role-based access and multi-factor authentication, limit who can view or modify ePHI, and audit logs provide a traceable record of access and activity, crucial for incident investigation and demonstrating compliance. This proactive, layered security strategy is the cornerstone of HIPAA compliance in a cloud context. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing a solution without verifying the cloud provider's HIPAA compliance status and without encrypting sensitive data at rest is a direct violation of the HIPAA security rule. The rule requires covered entities to ensure their business associates, which cloud providers often are, adhere to the same security standards. Failing to encrypt data at rest leaves ePHI vulnerable to breaches, directly contravening the technical safeguards mandate. Relying solely on the cloud provider's general security measures without specific HIPAA-compliant configurations is insufficient. Deploying a solution that only encrypts data in transit but not at rest, and without implementing granular access controls, also falls short. While encryption in transit is important, the security rule explicitly requires protection of ePHI both when it is being transmitted and when it is stored. The absence of robust access controls increases the risk of unauthorized internal access or accidental exposure. Choosing a cloud provider that explicitly states they are not HIPAA compliant, even if the data is anonymized, is a critical failure. While anonymization can reduce risk, if the data could be re-identified, or if the intent is to store PHI, using a non-compliant provider is a fundamental breach of due diligence and regulatory obligation. The responsibility ultimately rests with the covered entity to ensure all components of their ePHI handling infrastructure meet HIPAA standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based approach to cloud adoption, prioritizing compliance from the outset. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements, HIPAA in this case, evaluating cloud service providers based on their compliance certifications and offerings, and implementing a comprehensive security architecture that addresses all aspects of data protection. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying all data types and their regulatory classifications. 2. Researching and selecting cloud services that meet or exceed compliance requirements. 3. Designing and implementing security controls, encryption, access management, logging, tailored to the specific data and regulatory mandates. 4. Regularly auditing and reviewing security posture to adapt to evolving threats and regulations. Question 15. Regulatory review indicates that a new customer-facing application is being developed for rapid deployment. The application will process sensitive customer personal data. To accelerate the launch, the development team proposes to defer comprehensive data privacy impact assessments and the implementation of granular access controls until after the initial release, focusing only on essential security measures provided by the cloud infrastructure. What is the most appropriate course of action for the cloud administration team to ensure regulatory compliance? Option A. Collect all available customer data during the initial launch phase, with a plan to anonymize it retrospectively in the first post-launch update. Option B. Rely on the default security configurations of the chosen cloud provider, assuming they meet all necessary data protection requirements for the sensitive customer data. Option C. Proceed with the application launch as planned, with the understanding that the development team will address privacy and access control gaps in subsequent updates. Option D. Mandate the completion of a thorough data privacy impact assessment and the implementation of robust, role-based access controls as part of the pre-deployment checklist, even if it means a slight delay in the application launch. The correct answer is D. Mandate the completion of a thorough data privacy impact assessment and the implementation of robust, role-based access controls as part of the pre-deployment checklist, even if it means a slight delay in the application launch. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative to maintain compliance with data privacy regulations. The pressure to deliver a new customer-facing application quickly can lead to shortcuts in security and data handling practices. The professional challenge lies in identifying and mitigating these risks without unduly delaying the business objective. It requires a nuanced understanding of the specific regulatory landscape governing data processing and cloud services within the relevant jurisdiction. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy for data privacy and security throughout the application lifecycle. This aligns with the principles of privacy by design and security by design, which are increasingly mandated or strongly recommended by regulatory frameworks. By embedding data protection considerations from the initial design phase, including data minimization, purpose limitation, and robust access controls, the organization ensures that the application inherently complies with regulations. This approach minimizes the risk of costly remediation, data breaches, and regulatory penalties. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible data stewardship, which is a cornerstone of professional ethical conduct in cloud administration. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing security and privacy controls only after the application is developed and deployed represents a reactive and often insufficient approach. This fails to address potential vulnerabilities and data handling issues that may have been baked into the design, leading to significant rework and potential noncompliance. It also increases the risk of data breaches occurring during the initial operational period. Relying solely on the cloud provider's standard security features without a thorough assessment of their suitability for the specific data being processed and the application's requirements is another failure. Cloud providers offer robust security. The responsibility for configuring and utilizing these features correctly and ensuring they meet specific regulatory obligations for the customer's data remains with the customer. This oversight can lead to compliance gaps. Ignoring data minimization principles and collecting all available customer data with the intention of anonymizing it later introduces unnecessary risk. The collection of excessive personal data, even with a future anonymization plan, can violate data minimization principles and increase the scope of potential data breaches. Furthermore, the effectiveness and timing of anonymization processes themselves can be subject to regulatory scrutiny. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud administration must adopt a risk-based approach that prioritizes compliance and security from the outset. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the data being handled and the services being deployed. A key decision-making framework involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulations and guidelines. 2. Assessing the data types and sensitivity involved in the new application. 3. Integrating privacy and security requirements into the application design and development lifecycle. 4. Conducting thorough risk assessments and implementing appropriate controls. 5. Establishing clear data governance policies and procedures. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating security and privacy measures in response to evolving threats and regulatory changes. Question 16. Strategic planning requires a U.S.-based financial services firm to migrate sensitive customer financial data to a cloud environment. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework governing financial institutions in the United States and ensures robust data protection and auditability? Option A. Engage in a thorough due diligence process to select a cloud provider that demonstrably adheres to relevant U.S. financial regulations, e.g., SEC-FINRA, possesses robust security certifications, e.g., SOC 2 Type Roman 2, and can provide comprehensive audit trails for data access and modifications. Option B. Prioritize a cloud provider that offers the most flexible contract terms and avoids vendor lock-in, even if their compliance documentation for U.S. financial regulations is less detailed. Option C. Choose a cloud provider that offers cutting-edge, proprietary data analytics tools, with the understanding that data security and regulatory compliance will be addressed through internal IT policies after migration. Option D. Select a cloud provider based primarily on the lowest cost per gigabyte, assuming all major providers meet baseline security standards required by U.S. financial regulations. Correct answer is D. Select a cloud provider based primarily on the lowest cost per gigabyte, assuming all major providers meet baseline security standards required by U.S. financial regulations. Explanation: strategic planning for cloud administration in a regulated U.S. financial services environment presents significant challenges due to the stringent compliance requirements mandated by bodies like the SEC and FINRA. Organizations must balance the agility and cost-effectiveness of cloud solutions with the absolute necessity of data security, privacy, and auditability. The scenario is professionally challenging because a misstep in selecting or implementing cloud services can lead to severe financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust, all while potentially violating specific U.S. federal regulations governing financial data. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of cloud service providers' adherence to relevant U.S. financial regulations, such as those pertaining to data residency, encryption standards, access controls, and incident response. This includes verifying that the provider has undergone independent audits, e.g., SOC 2 Type Roman 2, and can provide detailed documentation demonstrating compliance. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core regulatory obligations of a U.S. financial institution. It prioritizes risk mitigation by ensuring that the chosen cloud infrastructure will not inadvertently expose the organization to regulatory noncompliance. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining operational integrity and meeting fiduciary duties. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without verifying regulatory compliance is professionally unacceptable. This would represent a failure to adhere to U.S. federal regulations like the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA, or SEC Rule 17A4, which mandates specific data protection and record-keeping standards for financial institutions. Such an approach risks data breaches and unauthorized access, leading to significant fines and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes vendor lock-in avoidance over security and compliance is also professionally unsound. While flexibility is desirable, it should not come at the expense of meeting regulatory mandates. Ignoring the compliance posture of a cloud provider in favor of perceived future flexibility can lead to the adoption of services that are inherently noncompliant, creating a significant regulatory liability. A third incorrect approach that assumes all cloud providers offer equivalent security and compliance is a dangerous oversimplification. U.S. financial regulations are specific and require demonstrable adherence. Relying on assumptions rather than due diligence can result in the selection of a provider that, while offering advanced features, does not meet the rigorous security and auditability requirements necessary for handling sensitive financial data, thus violating the spirit and letter of U.S. financial regulations. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of applicable U.S. federal and state regulations relevant to their industry and data types. This should be followed by a detailed risk assessment of potential cloud solutions, prioritizing compliance and security over other factors. Vendor due diligence must be rigorous, involving verification of certifications, audit reports, and contractual agreements that explicitly address regulatory requirements. Continuous monitoring and periodic reassessment of cloud service compliance are also essential components of responsible cloud administration in this domain. Question 17. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a critical customer-facing application hosted on a cloud platform has been experiencing intermittent performance degradation, leading to user complaints and potential revenue loss. The engineering team is under immense pressure to resolve the issue immediately. The cloud administrator is considering several immediate actions to address the situation. Option A. Immediately disable all intrusion detection and prevention systems for the affected application to reduce network overhead and improve response times. Option B. Initiate a full rollback of the recent application deployment and restore the environment to its previous stable state, followed by a thorough root cause analysis of the performance issues. Option C. Temporarily increase the compute resources allocated to the application without investigating the root cause of the performance degradation. Option D. Focus solely on optimizing the application code for better performance without investigating the underlying infrastructure or potential security vulnerabilities. The correct answer is B. Initiate a full rollback of the recent application deployment and restore the environment to its previous stable state, followed by a thorough root cause analysis of the performance issues. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration where a critical service outage impacts business operations, and the pressure to restore service quickly can lead to rushed decisions. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for resolution with the long-term implications of security and compliance, especially when dealing with sensitive customer data. The organization's reliance on the cloud for core functions amplifies the urgency and the potential for significant financial and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. Implementing a robust incident response plan that includes clear communication channels, defined roles and responsibilities, and a systematic approach to root cause analysis is best professional practice. This aligns with general IT governance principles and in the context of U.S. regulations like HIPAA for healthcare data or PCI DSS for payment card data, mandates specific procedures for data breach notification and incident management. A structured approach ensures that the resolution not only restores service, but also addresses the underlying vulnerability, preventing recurrence and maintaining customer trust. This methodical process is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and compliance with data protection and service availability requirements. Incorrect approaches analysis. Choosing to immediately restore the service from the most recent backup without a thorough investigation of the root cause is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach bypasses critical security and compliance checks, potentially reintroducing the vulnerability that caused the outage or failing to address a security breach. For instance, if the outage was due to a malicious attack, restoring from a compromised backup could perpetuate the attack. This violates principles of data integrity and security mandated by regulations like the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which emphasizes incident response and recovery. Disabling all security features to expedite service restoration is another severe failure. This directly contravenes security best practices and regulatory requirements designed to protect sensitive data. Regulations such as GDPR, if applicable to customer data, and various U.S. state data breach notification laws impose strict obligations to maintain the confidentiality and integrity of personal information. Disabling security measures creates an unacceptable risk of unauthorized access and data exfiltration, leading to severe legal penalties and loss of customer confidence. Ignoring the incident and waiting for it to resolve itself is a complete abdication of responsibility and a direct violation of service-level agreements, SLAs, and regulatory expectations for business continuity. Organizations are expected to actively manage and mitigate IT incidents. This passive approach demonstrates a lack of preparedness and a disregard for customer impact, which can lead to contractual breaches and regulatory scrutiny for failing to protect data and maintain service availability. Professional reasoning. When faced with a cloud service outage, a professional cloud administrator should follow a structured incident response framework. This typically involves 1. Identification and triage. Quickly assess the impact and scope of the incident. 2. Containment. Prevent further damage or spread of the issue. 3. Eradication. Remove the root cause. 4. Recovery. Restore affected services. 5. Lessons learned. Conduct a post-incident review to improve future responses. This systematic process ensures that all aspects of the incident, including security and compliance, are addressed, rather than just the immediate symptom of service unavailability. Question 18. Implementation of a new customer relationship management (CRM) system in a cloud environment requires careful consideration of data handling and privacy regulations. The organization operates in a jurisdiction with strict data residency laws that mandate customer personal data must be stored and processed within the country's borders. Which of the following actions best ensures compliance with these data residency laws during the cloud CRM system's implementation? Option A. Prioritizing the cloud CRM solution with the most advanced features and the lowest cost, and addressing any potential data residency issues after the system is live. Option B. Selecting a cloud CRM provider that offers a global network of data centers and confirming their general compliance certifications. Option C. Deploying the cloud CRM system using the provider's default configuration and assuming that the provider handles all data residency concerns automatically. Option D. Engaging with the legal and compliance departments to identify specific data residency requirements and verifying that the chosen cloud CRM service can be configured to store and process all customer personal data exclusively within the designated geographic region. The correct answer is B. Selecting a cloud CRM provider that offers a global network of data centers and confirming their general compliance certifications. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative to maintain regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in the inherent tension between agility and control. Organizations operating within regulated industries, such as finance or healthcare, must adhere to specific data protection, privacy, and security mandates. Failure to do so can result in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough understanding of applicable regulations and their implications for cloud service selection and configuration. This involves proactive engagement with legal and compliance teams to identify relevant mandates, such as those pertaining to data residency, encryption standards, audit trails, and access controls. By integrating compliance requirements into the initial design and procurement phases, organizations can select cloud services that inherently meet these obligations, thereby minimizing the risk of noncompliance and the need for costly remediation later. This proactive stance is considered best professional practice because it embeds compliance as a foundational element of cloud strategy, rather than an afterthought. It demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible cloud adoption, aligning with the principles of risk management and corporate governance expected in regulated environments. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with a cloud service deployment without a comprehensive assessment of regulatory requirements. This could involve selecting a service based solely on cost or feature set, without verifying its adherence to data privacy laws like GDPR, if applicable to the jurisdiction, or specific industry standards. Such an oversight represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It exposes the organization to the risk of data breaches, unauthorized access, or improper data handling, all of which can lead to severe legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that a cloud provider's general compliance certifications automatically cover all specific regulatory needs of the organization. While certifications are valuable, they are often broad and may not address the nuanced requirements of a particular industry or jurisdiction. Relying solely on these without due diligence is a failure of professional responsibility. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks and guidelines relevant to the organization's operations and the data being processed. This should be followed by a risk assessment to understand the potential impact of noncompliance. Subsequently, cloud service options should be evaluated against these identified requirements, with a preference for solutions that offer demonstrable compliance features. Continuous monitoring and auditing of cloud environments are also crucial to ensure ongoing adherence to regulations. Question 19. The control framework reveals that a new cloud-based application is being developed that will handle sensitive customer financial data. The development team is eager to deploy the application quickly to meet market demand. Which approach best ensures regulatory compliance without hindering innovation? Option A. Rely on manual, post-deployment audits conducted by a separate compliance team to identify and rectify any regulatory gaps after the application is live. Option B. Focus solely on meeting the functional requirements of the application, deferring all compliance-related tasks to the operations team after the initial launch. Option C. Allow the development team to deploy the application with minimal compliance oversight, assuming that any issues can be addressed in subsequent updates. Option D. Implement automated compliance checks and policy enforcement within the CI/CD pipeline to validate configurations and security settings before and during deployment. The correct answer is D. Implement automated compliance checks and policy enforcement within the CI/CD pipeline to validate configurations and security settings before and during deployment. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative of maintaining regulatory compliance. In the context of the 210-455 exam, which focuses on Cisco cloud administration, understanding how to integrate compliance checks into the cloud lifecycle is paramount. This scenario is professionally challenging because a failure to adequately address compliance requirements before or during deployment can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The pressure to innovate and deliver quickly often creates tension with the meticulous processes required for regulatory adherence. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively embeds compliance into the cloud service lifecycle. By establishing automated compliance checks within the CI/CD pipeline and ensuring that all deployed resources adhere to predefined security and regulatory baselines, administrators minimize risk. This aligns with the principles of compliance by design and security by design, which are fundamental to modern cloud governance. Specifically, for a US-based regulatory environment, as implied by the exam's typical scope, this would involve adhering to frameworks like NIST, HIPAA, or PCI DSS, depending on the data being handled. Automating these checks ensures consistency, reduces human error, and provides an auditable trail, all of which are critical for demonstrating compliance to auditors and regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach that bypasses automated compliance checks during deployment is professionally unacceptable due to direct regulatory and ethical failures. It demonstrates a disregard for established legal and industry standards designed to protect sensitive data and ensure system integrity. This could lead to violations of data privacy laws, e.g., CCPA if applicable, security standards, and contractual obligations. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold the duty of care owed to customers and stakeholders by exposing them to unnecessary risks. Another incorrect approach, relying solely on post-deployment audits, is also professionally deficient. While audits are necessary, they are reactive. Waiting until after deployment to discover compliance issues means that non-compliant systems are already in production, potentially exposing the organization to immediate risk and requiring costly and disruptive remediation efforts. This approach fails to implement preventative controls, which are a cornerstone of effective risk management and regulatory compliance. The professional reasoning process for navigating such situations should involve a risk-based approach. First, identify all applicable regulatory requirements based on the type of data being processed and the industry sector. Second, translate these requirements into technical controls and policies. Third, integrate these controls into the cloud architecture and operational processes, prioritizing automation. Fourth, establish continuous monitoring and auditing mechanisms. Finally, foster a culture of compliance where all team members understand their role in maintaining regulatory adherence. This proactive and integrated strategy ensures that compliance is not an afterthought but a fundamental aspect of cloud administration. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that a U.S.-based financial services firm is migrating sensitive customer financial data to a new cloud infrastructure. The firm's IT department is eager to leverage the agility and scalability of the cloud for faster service delivery. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with U.S. federal and state data privacy regulations during this migration? Option A. Relying solely on the cloud provider's standard security features and compliance statements, assuming they meet all necessary U.S. regulatory requirements for financial data. Option B. Implementing robust data encryption, strict access controls, comprehensive audit logging, and verifying the cloud provider's compliance certifications against relevant U.S. financial data regulations. Option C. Prioritizing the speed of data migration to the cloud, with a plan to address specific data privacy compliance concerns after the initial deployment is complete. Option D. Conducting a high-level data inventory and assuming that all customer financial data is of a uniform sensitivity level, applying a single set of security controls across the board. Correct answer is B. Implementing robust data encryption, strict access controls, comprehensive audit logging, and verifying the cloud provider's compliance certifications against relevant U.S. financial data regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud administration, balancing the need for rapid deployment and innovation with the imperative to adhere to stringent data privacy regulations. The organization is operating within the United States, and therefore, all regulatory considerations must strictly align with U.S. federal and relevant state laws, such as HIPAA for healthcare data or GDPR-like principles if handling data of EU citizens, though the prompt specifies U.S. jurisdiction, so the primary focus is U.S. federal and state. The challenge lies in the potential for misinterpreting or overlooking specific data handling requirements when migrating sensitive customer information to a new cloud environment. Failure to do so can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive data governance strategy that is integrated into the cloud migration process from the outset. This means conducting a thorough data inventory and classification to understand the types of data being migrated, their sensitivity levels, and the applicable regulatory requirements, e.g. PI5. Implementing robust access controls, encryption at rest and in transit, and audit logging mechanisms are critical technical safeguards. Furthermore, ensuring that the chosen cloud service provider's security and compliance certifications meet or exceed regulatory mandates, e.g. FedRAMP for government data, HITRUST for healthcare, is paramount. This approach demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance as a foundational element of cloud adoption, rather than an afterthought. It aligns with the principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and security by design, which are core tenets of U.S. data privacy laws. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that standard cloud provider security features are sufficient without a detailed assessment of specific data types and their regulatory implications. This overlooks the nuances of U.S. data privacy laws, which often require specific controls for different categories of data. For instance, simply encrypting data might not be enough if the encryption keys are not managed according to specific compliance standards, or if access logging is inadequate for audit purposes. This approach risks violating regulations like HIPAA, which mandates specific safeguards for protected health information. 5. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of migration over thorough due diligence regarding data handling and compliance. This might involve migrating data without fully understanding its classification or the associated regulatory obligations. Such haste can lead to the accidental exposure of sensitive data or the use of cloud services that do not meet the necessary compliance standards. This is a direct contravention of the reasonable security measures expected under various U.S. privacy statutes and could result in significant fines and legal action. A third incorrect approach is to delegate all compliance responsibility to the cloud service provider without independent verification. While providers offer compliance certifications, the customer organization remains ultimately responsible for how it uses the cloud services and manages its data within that environment. Relying solely on the provider's assurances without understanding the shared responsibility model and conducting internal audits can lead to compliance gaps. This failure to exercise due diligence is a common pitfall that can result in regulatory violations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to cloud migration, integrating compliance and security considerations from the initial planning stages. This involves establishing clear data governance policies, performing thorough data classification, selecting cloud services that meet specific regulatory requirements, and implementing appropriate technical and organizational safeguards. Continuous monitoring, regular audits, and ongoing training are essential to maintain compliance in a dynamic cloud environment. The decision-making process should always prioritize understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the data being handled and ensuring that all cloud operations are designed to meet those obligations.